Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Electricity Association's Conversation webinar series. The CEA is the voice of the electricity industry in Canada. My name is Farhan Mirza, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's session. The Conversation series features presentations from CEA's corporate partners, and the series will highlight a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by the industry. Working with CEA's corporate partners, these webinars have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the utility space from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, check out CEA's website at www.electricity.ca. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Our session today is scheduled to run from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Questions can be asked, and we'd encourage you to do so as they come to mind by typing into your chat function on the screen. They will be asked at the end of the presentation. And a brief survey will be sent to webinar participants following the session today. We very much appreciate your candid feedback and are interested to hear any topics you'd like to have covered in the conversation series in the future. And please keep an eye out for future webinars through CEA's newsletter, Current Affairs. With over 6,000 subscribers, Current Affairs, much like the national newspaper, is the place to go for Canadian industry news as we connect the value chain from generation through to the customer. If you'd like to receive Current Affairs, you can subscribe to this free publication by visiting CEA's website at www.electricity.ca. Today, Forest Technology Systems will be presenting wildfire mitigation technology enhancements, supporting safety and resiliency of grid operations. Weather monitoring, observation technologies, and predictive services help reduce risk exposure, enhance performance, increase safety, and improve success in grid operations while contending with a wide range of emergency situations. Extreme weather events are trending up, and resilient infrastructure is imperative to not only safety, but business operations continuity. In this webinar, wildfire risk in the context of overall risk to utility assets and infrastructure. We will look at how key weather data inputs from dedicated wildfire weather networks bring tremendous value to grid operations, and learn how to enhance your situational awareness using automated camera imagery in your areas of interest. Discover simple, scalable technologies that easily integrate into the existing systems and provide real-time information to help make better operational decisions based on real-time observed conditions and circumstances. Our presenters today are Sean Bethel, Wildfire Mitigation Specialist and Director of Business Development at FTS, and Mark Hoeksema, Chief Meteorologist, Director of Meteorological Operations at Earth Networks, which is part of Advanced Environmental Monitoring. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you today to the Conversation series, and I'll turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks very much, Farhan, and appreciate everyone's time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I'm really pleased to have Mark Hoeksema join me today. We're going to get into his content a little bit after I do mine. I'm going to do a little introduction about our organization, our role in the wildfire management industry, and how it translates into successes in electric utility organizations. So because of bandwidth issues, if you don't mind, I'm going to go off camera and just focus on the slide deck. So just bear with me here. I still got visual there, guys?
Good to go.
Okay, great, thanks. And again, thanks for the introduction. Before I kind of get into the content of the situational awareness technologies, I'm just going to try and advance the next slide here. There we go. It's a little delayed. So a little introduction about myself before I get into the technologies and the subject matter of today's webinar. My wildfire journey started when I was about 18 years old. I worked with the BC Wildfire Services for about 24 years. Worked with the rappel crew, spent a lot of time on the ground. I did aviation roles as well. Incident commander and worked on incident command teams. In my later stages of my career, worked as a provincial fire control officer. So that's a role. It's a duty roster, 1 week rotations during fire season. Fulfilling resource needs to the different fire regions or fire centers, as we call them, make sure that they have all the resources they need to take action on wildfires as they happen. I was one of the co-authors and developments of cooperation agreements with cross-border agreements with the United States, also with Australia, New Zealand, and also Mexico. I did manage the international cooperation program for the province for about 10 years. And I'm happy to see that a lot of those international agreements are being exercised today, especially in today's circumstances of climate change and increased upward trends in wildfire behavior and whatnot, and the need for outside resources. Wildfire mitigation planning has kind of been really what I've done outside of government, both within government. When I left government in 2007, provided some wildfire audits, in Canada, Australia, some of the usual wildfire markets that have had serious wildfire issues, Greece, the Peloponnese in 2007. And for the last 15 years, I've been working with private sector technology solution providers. And the last 2 years, I've been working with FTS to help them, share their great story, their great successes with the wildfire agencies over decades with wildfire weather, predictive services, remote sensing technologies, and how that translates very readily into electric utilities. So I'm very pleased to have been, part of the wildfire industry for a lot of years, and super happy and passionate about sharing, the knowledge transfer about experiences in wildfire and how that translates into successes for different organizations. This is some of the imagery you see on the screen there. This is our I would say a new reality, but for a lot of people, it's a new reality because, we're seeing more and more wildfire in our back door and causing major disruptions to our lives. So just some intro comments about wildfire and specific to electric utilities, and there's a lot of infrastructure out in the landscape, and these extreme weather events that we're seeing, as I mentioned, the trending up in terms of wildfire behavior, and the wildfire risk potential is creating a major risk to safety, public safety, worker safety, but also our business continuation and business operations on a regular basis. Some jurisdictions, not just during wildfire season for 4, 5, 6 months of the year, for some in the case of investor-owned utilities and electric utilities in Western USA, especially in California, they're seeing that 12 months of the year now. But it's in terms of utility and emergency operations, the professionals that are doing that work need to rely on, robust, accurate information to make good decisions to keep, frontline workers safe, and when they're out there in the field doing their jobs, and protect the public as well. So today I want to look at some simple, easy to integrate scalable technologies, as Farhan mentioned in the intro, and how this can help increase the resiliency of the, the infrastructure and assets that are out there with the electric utility organizations. And some of the key takeaways is really, and it was what I say during, other audits and consulting services I've done is, I get asked, Sean, what kind of resources should we have? What kind of, mix of helicopter, fixed wing, aviation, aerial firefighting resources, ground equipment, technologies, et cetera, everything under the sun. And I said, well, let's talk about your workload. Like, how many fires do you have a year? What kind of fires? Where are they? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked up front. And what I would say, and I'm a huge advocate of all through my wildfire career over 35 years, is that it starts with the weather, because the weather is driving the wildfire behavior. Topography and the fuel load, the vegetation, of course, is a big part of that. But all those are impacted by weather, whether it's microclimates in the landscape, or the impact of weather on the fuel that's out there, the combustible material, waiting, decaying in the ground, and all kinds of different factors involved, and it's all related to the weather. So I would say that to develop a common operating picture for dealing with your action plans or your calls to action for your the wildfire challenges of a, say, electric utility organization, it starts with situational awareness, right? And that's so I wanted to talk about this solution set technologies that are out there. They're very scalable, very bite-sized. They don't actually cost a lot of money in the bigger picture, and they can really help provide some real-time information to make some real-time decisions, you know, based on observed conditions and the circumstances that are making you know, our daily lives difficult, especially during fire season. So, you know, about 3 weeks ago, I attended a Western Energy Institute conference, a wildfire summit, and David Morton, the BC Utilities Commissioner, referenced the fire season in British Columbia in 2003, and it really struck a note with me, resounded. I thought about it a lot, and you know, I decided to throw in a few slides from that in here because it's you know, it's something that we've seen in the past. We used to see kind of a El Nino La Nina sort of cyclical pattern of, you know, especially in Canada, in Western Canada, in Western United States, was just every sort of 3 or 4 years a very serious wildfire season. But 2003 was benchmark for British Columbia, and I use that as an example because I was there and lived and breathed that. But up until 2003, the record season was 1958, and now we've seen in the last 5 years, not just in British Columbia, but you know, Western United States and Western Canada, Fort Mac, you know, and numerous examples of, you know, back-to-back very serious wildfire seasons. So I'll just run through a few slides and just show you by 1 week the change that occurs in British Columbia. We used to see more of the, you know, fire season starts in the north, you know, where it's the holdover, again, not so much holdover, but the dead material, it gets covered with snow. And so in the spring, when we have the snowpack runoff, we get the early fires in the north. The south remains pretty wet. And as you go 1 week into July, you sort of see a transformation happening by mid-July. And this is typical that the fire season shifts from the northern half to the southern half. And in particular, where we start to see the red dots, or that's Kamloops Fire Center. And as we approach the end of July in 2003, you see the red areas, which is extreme wildfire danger. The situation gets pretty grave. And you know, that year we were impressed by the brown, which was a color we hadn't really seen before, but most of the province was in an extreme wildfire condition. Add in about 40,000 lightning strikes in a 2-week period. The positive signs there are cloud to ground strikes, so they're actually interfering with the ground and the source of ignition. And what resulted out of that mayhem was chaos, you know, from mid-July to almost mid-September, 1,700 wildfires. And, you know, those are some of the problematic fires listed there. And some of you, especially if you're from British Columbia, may recognize some of the names of those fires. They're using fire numbers now, but those are the ones there. And so to summarize that fire season, 2,200 fires, or, you know, more, I wouldn't say spot fires, and they're definitely beyond initial attack, but under 10 acres. 110 of those were more than 270 acres, and 36 of those, 36 fires were over 2,400 acres, and 8 of those were well over 20,000 acres. So quite a workload in 2003, and we saw similar statistics and data from 2017 and 2018 wildfire seasons as well. So the daily maximums, and this is 03, just keep in mind, but a number of new fires in one day. We had over 200 new fires in one day, and over a 6-day period, over 700 fires in one day. We had almost 750 fires actively burning. And, you know, we started our provincial contracts off with 4 provincial contracted helicopters, and we ramped up to 220, went from 15 fixed wing air tankers up to 40 to respond. We needed to import firefighters from every province and territory across Canada, even the military. So we're close to 8,000 firefighters, and, you know, over 30,000 acres burned, you know, and you know, under 10 million to suppress, but that's just in one day. Some of those stats are way off the chart now, based on you know, the trends that are at play in more recent years. So I wanted to introduce a little bit more about FTS as we get into the technology. FTS is, you know, founded by a wildland firefighter in the early 80s. We're known for our wildfire weather stations, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about that later. And we're part of a larger group, the Advanced Environmental Monitoring Group. So we're 7 brands under one brand. 5 of those are USA based. FTS is in Canada, based in Victoria, just south of where I live, about 1 hour on Vancouver Island, and Lambrecht Mateos in Germany. But we cover everything from, lightning, and, Mark Hoeksema from Earth Networks is going to speak to the weather forecasting services and a little bit on lightning, but precision and weather, climate monitoring, anything to do with agricultural weather monitoring, anything with water bodies, hydrological monitoring and alerting, and of course wildfire situational awareness, which is really my focus on today. And who we serve are over 50 USA wildfire agencies, but we're also serving all the agencies across Canada through CIFSI and the cross-border agreements, which I talked about earlier. Really enabling these agencies that you see their logos on the slide there to look at wildfire danger maps, which are coming from the data provided by our weather stations in the national wildfire danger rating network of stations, to make the decisions on where resources need to be and when. It's not about responding to wildfires as they happen. It's about prevention and preparedness and having the resources in place before the fires start. In terms of utility customers, well, like I mentioned before, we're trying to translate. There's a great story to be told, and a lot of people haven't heard it yet. That, for 40 years, FTS has been supporting the wildfire agencies in North America, Australia, some parts of Southeast Asia and Latin America. And, we've been working with a lot of the utility organizations. Some of them maybe not so much specifically on wildfire and wildfire weather stations, but definitely with hydrological solutions. But, and a lot of people don't know that, STG&E invested in FTS RAWS stations probably, 16 years ago. And that started their development of a major network of fire weather stations that had tremendous success with that, and expanded on with cameras and artificial intelligence and all kinds of useful technologies that other utilities are adapting as well. And so some of the brands that you see up there and the companies that we're working with are very interested in expanding out their networks as well. And we're helping them to do that. So when I talk about, you hear wildfire mitigation said a lot, you hear sometimes common operating picture and situational awareness. And so my background, and really what we always used to look at wildfire management as a business cycle. And, you see these terms used a lot. Prevention, preparedness, response, they're kind of more, obvious. And but rehabilitation and recovery seldom gets the kind of playtime it should, because a lot of people don't realize, and more understanding now, that after the wildfire goes through, there's a ton of opportunity for more disruption, whether it's the soil erosion from wildfires on steep slopes and the runoff and flooding that happens. Again, the people that were negatively impacted in a hard way from wildfires now have to deal with major water and debris flows coming into their communities, and also a major disruption for utility organizations. They're trying to keep the power onto the people, the consumers, but also to the emergency response organizations that are trying to help out with the flood mitigation. Of course, recovery is one, often the bean counters get to that one, and the insurance companies and the lawyers, there's all the fallout and the payments for things that have happened, whether it's to pay for, things that were your fault, or to repair things, or to replace things, all the fallout from these major disasters. So I won't go through all the bullet points there, but these are some of the questions that need to be asked, like, what are the professionals using? What's the scale of the workload? What are the vulnerabilities? And, we talk about like identifying what, we look at risk and consequence models and analysis, and, what are the critical thresholds? What are the triggers for the calls to action? And without, I'd say and argue strongly that without knowing what the weather's going to do, it's really hard to make accurate, timely, best practice decisions and practices of prudence about what wildfire is going to do. So I just, emphasize that point. And the other one is to communicate. It's easy to say, well, we need to communicate more, but all these things that we're looking at and the enabling capabilities of some of this technology that we're going to talk about is letting people know about it, not just the workers, but the public, and keep them informed, and all the stakeholders and other agencies, because we're all living through the same disaster at times. And the whole goal at the end of it is just to keep everyone safe and protect people and communities. So in terms of the remote automated weather station networks that support, not just British Columbia, and the top right corner is a map showed, I think we had about 280 remote automated weather stations. There might be more than that nowadays, but 20 years ago, that we used the data from those weather stations to make those maps that you see on the left there. And then in the bottom right corner, you can see the little black dots across the United States. Those are all the FTS, remote automated weather stations. That's the network that comprises the National Fire Danger Rating System in the United States. So these are, providing hourly weather data. It can be accessed on a push to click or by the minute, but most agencies are setting, hourly weather data. Some of them through GOES satellite, because they don't want to have any interruption in telemetry and communications. But these are our standardized set of specific scientific grade weather sensors, and they want the accuracy, and they with that standard of weather stations that FTS meets, they require annual maintenance and calibration of the sensors. So when we talked about prevention and preparedness earlier, and I mentioned about knowing your workload. Well, that's exactly what this is all about. And those signs that you see on the side of the highway or posted anywhere in a public area, the data from, that provides the authorities, information to know where to put that needle on that scale is based on the weather stations that we provide. So to put it in perspective, the order of magnitude and sort of the scope is, and this is just the United States, apologies, I don't have the Canadian data here, but 500 million wildfire data points collected each year. Last year, there were, over 10 million acres burned in the United States from over 58,000 wildfires. And across a network of roughly 3,000 FDS weather stations, that's how they were able to collect all those weather data points. I think there were over 3,000, I think there are actually 3,500 remote automated weather stations in the United States alone, but registered in this data and statistic is only 2,900. And that means that only 2,903 were actively collecting data. And that means they were in compliance with the national standards set in the United States. So the other, 400 or 500 were either the sensors were out of calibration, or they were taken offline because they needed to be, required maintenance or some nature. But so they're very specific about the standard, and they're very specific about good data versus poor data. So only the stations that are transmitting accurate data based on calibration and annual maintenance are considered valid. So in terms of, and Mark's going to speak to some of this. This is statistics more from Earth Networks with their spheric maps, but also in our FTS 360 software is tracking lightning. And Earth Networks in the United States alone, we're tracking over 440 million lightning impulses, and 31 million of those were cloud to ground. And from a firefighting, fire management perspective or wildfire mitigation planning point of view for electric utility, very much concerned would be the cloud to ground lightning hitting the ground, because any condition that's ripe for wildfire, any single lightning strike could be a wildfire ignition point. So very important to track that. In terms of situational awareness, there's just some panels there of, I use these as examples of when I was a wildfire manager and provincial fire control officer, and my colleagues, we were looking at these panels on hourly, by the minute, every day. This is what we lived and breathed. And so monitoring, looking at the fire danger rating map on the bottom left corner there, seeing where the red parts are of areas of concern. Some of the blue areas might be areas that were red or yellow the previous week, but they got a whole bunch of rain, so it was less of an area of concern. We're tracking lightning coming in from the United States, looking at fire growth modeling, looking at historical wildfire occurrences, and sort of estimating what areas were burned versus not burned. In other words, looking at the abundance of available fuel should a new fire start. Looking at, excuse me, in the bottom right, just the left where you see the red and the green, those are, looking at long-range spotting models where fires are with convection column kicking up firebrands and dropping them in new opportunities for newer fires. And so a lot of technologies at play that are available, that were available 20 years ago even, and they're still available now, using more and more in a widespread way. So these are, some of the key advantages of, installing a real-time weather or camera network, is that especially with the electric utilities and the wildfire agencies, that there are a lot more infrastructure in our landscape than there used to be, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, in terms of, communications towers, wireless internet service provider towers, and distribution poles, transmission towers. These can all accept technology. It can be, weather stations and cameras can be installed onto these assets and infrastructure, and get greater density of weather data out there, real-time data that facilitates accurate modeling and prediction and forecasting, improves the site-specific understanding of what's going on out there. And for utility organizations specifically that already have weather stations, well, some of these can be used as infill stations, because a lot of utility organizations that I talk with say that we just don't have enough data, and they have a lot of gaps. So we work with them to identify where the gaps are. With cameras, we work with them, get their shape files, and look at view shed analysis, opportunities for viewpoints that can help them with their operations and their grid resiliency. So it's really just about having eyes on the landscape. And I talk about cameras a little bit later, that, there are drones out there, lots of, aircraft, especially during fire season, even commercial flights going overhead that report wildfires. But, there are a lot of gaps in time between detection from aerial resources, and having cameras out there, I would argue, gives you that moment of, like, I want to go and see what's going on out there. I know we have active fire weather right now. Lightning came through because we got the alert from a mobile app. Thank you, Earth Networks. and I want to go and have a look at that. So you can pull up a camera. I'll get into that a little bit later about the alerting with the cameras, but the imagery, still imagery, or streaming video, all these can give a lot more information about what's going on in the landscape, especially as we see that, and it happens in wildfire agencies as well as electric utilities, that people that were very experienced with operations and specific to wildfire, they retire, and some of the younger people in upcoming positions don't have that legacy of knowledge and experience sometimes. So having the ability to see things and share that with other people goes a long way in terms of operations and success. FTS 360, I mentioned that earlier. It's really the software that we call the catcher's mitt that can take data from anything that's out there. It's Internet of Things, cloud-based. It's pulling in for information, whether it's weather stations, whether they're ours or someone else's, the imagery from the wildfire cameras, pan-tilted cameras, anything that's out there in the field that you want to pull in and have a look at on a screen, whether it's on your desktop or on a handheld device. It's all there. The portable weather solutions, I talked about the remote automated weather stations, and those are traditionally a fixed configuration, but we also have portable options. Compact automated weather stations are ones that would traditionally mount to a distribution pole or a transmission tower. Same sensor pack as a remote automated weather station that's used in the wildfire danger rating networks. We have portable units that are, in 2 Pelican cases, and one person could set it up in 15 minutes, no tools required. Again, same sensor package as the RAWs, with the exception of a 30-foot wind anemometer for wind speed and direction. But it gives you essentially all the same kind of data that you need out in the field. And micro weather sensors, which through a partnership with IntelliSense, we have a lightweight, portable, weighs 3.5 pounds, fits in a backpack. These can go on poles or can be mounted to vehicles, as more traditional, kind of came out of the military organizations that were mounting these on Humvees for military operations, but they are available as well. And we traditionally offer these as a vehicle mount option for people that want weather data out in the field. And I mentioned about the FTS 360 already. I won't go into, I'm going to keep cognizant of time here and keep moving along. And but in terms of lightning overlays, air quality indexes, these are other sensor packages that can be added along with cameras and weather stations to give you more visibility. And we also offer through our, an option for the web software platform is the Overwatch, which allows organizations to choose whether they want to keep the data proprietary and private, or they want to push it out to general public through a public access portal, which can be very beneficial for local communities, customer engagement for utilities, public safety power shutoffs, et cetera, evacuation planning. I mean, the more people that are aware of what's going on is not always such a bad thing. The PTZ cameras, these are really a game changer, and we're not the only vendor doing this, but they are instrumental, as I mentioned already a little bit about it. But some of the key things are, in terms of the live 1080p video streaming, 30 frames per second, 360-degree field of view with 40-time optical zoom gives you a lot of capability. I mean, in terms of what you can see from 3 miles out, you can look at danger trees, look at vegetation encroachment on your lines and areas of interest, line strikes, for example. 5 miles out, you can actually make out a vehicle, make and model, some granularity on people out there, which might be important for fire cause investigation, for example, or just safety. And then 20 miles out, wildfire detection and monitoring. Obviously, you can see columns or smoke in the horizon. With the infrared thermal options, you can also see at nighttime. You have extremely good visibility at nighttime in terms of fire growth and fire perimeters. And we've even had some customers see 25 miles or slightly more than that, up to 30 miles of wildfire visibility at night. So it's pretty incredible the empowerment you get from having this visibility on the landscape. So anyway, I didn't want to spend too much more time, because I'm going to hand it over to Mark here, make sure he has enough time to talk about Earth networks and weather forecasting services. But some of the key takeaways are for this is really just looking at knowing your workload. Understand that there are scalable technologies out there. They're bite-size, affordable, investments. It really can support wildfire mitigation planning, but always stress that a wildfire risk assessment is a really good starting point. Improve your ability to get a common operating picture through enhanced situational awareness. Keep those frontline workers safe while they're out there doing their good work, and minimize the impact on our communities. So. With that said, I'll hand it over to Mark, and thank you for your time, and look forward to the Q&A later.
Great, thanks, Sean. A lot of good stuff there, and a lot of good things to think about. Adding to what Sean has said, he obviously went through a lot of different data sets that folks that work in utilities have to be aware of, and they have to, managing the ingestion of that data and understanding if there's a threat can just take a whole lot of time. Weather is only one of the things that folks like you have to worry about with respect to your operations. And so one of the things that I'm going to talk about here is just to give you some ideas about custom support services that are available, and how we manage understanding fire risk, how we make you situationally aware of things that go on in your region. Meteorological operations is a big task, and it's very complicated, and we take all that sort of work off the plate of our utility clients when it comes to understanding, do I need to worry about weather today? And if I do, where do I have to, and when do I have to? I'm going to go over some of the advantages of the support, and who and how you benefit from it. I'll also talk a little bit about our support products, just to give you an idea of how a utility might use products. It's very customizable. We understand that utilities are different because of geography and climate and geographic footprint And all those come into play as to, you know, ultimately what would be the best support product for a utility. So first, you know, we have a large staff. I want to give you a little bit of background about Earth Networks. Earth Networks has been is about a 30-year-old company. We have a staff of fully degreed meteorologists that work 24/7, 365, exclusively for each client with 24/7 phone support. So there's quick access to a meteorologist if things are going awry in your territory, or whether it's with a forecast. And so, you know, a staff like that can be a pretty good asset to your arsenal when you're trying to understand, you know, what you have to worry about as far as disaster mitigation or your asset protection. All these things: business continuity, operational efficiency, the safety of your staff, the human resource problem of having staff in the field. All these things, you know, having a custom forecast support gets you paid back by saving money in all these areas. How many crews are you going to need on a certain day with the certain weather risks that you have? It also will keep your staff safe, and obviously your customers. If you're keeping your trucks off of dry grass where fires could start, you're going to keep customers happy and safe. And so all these things that you generally will end up spending money, having human costs with, hopefully a custom forecast support will help mitigate that financial and operational and human risk that you're facing every day. So the folks that generally use this, I'm sure there's some of you on this call, the business continuity managers, obviously operations managers, keeping the whole business running is important. We have emergency preparedness managers, safety managers. There's system ops and building ops managers. Also for maybe the ground operations, which would be, you know, keeping your building open, getting your staff into work on time. All weather information that can help these sorts of folks within your business make the proper decisions. It's there's a lot of guessing often when it comes to weather. There's a lot of watching TV, listening to the radio. Heaven forbid, social media can really confuse things. And so, you know, all those things are things that we want to, with a forecast support, take the noise out, clear the fog, make a clear message that you can communicate down to everyone within the company, a single message. Earth Network supports a wide range of businesses. Of course, energy, utilities, transmission companies. We do global work. In this day and age, you can support anyone from anywhere. And so with our 24/7, 365 operations, it's always fully staffed to give anyone in these sorts of businesses the information they need in a timely manner. It's really important, and it's super flexible. All of our clients have opportunities where we go through and we consult with them on where their pain points are, where they spend the most time, where are they losing money, and then we circle back around and we try and tailor a forecast product that will be exactly what is needed. Certain utilities have certain thresholds for weather where they get more outages or have more concerns. For example, wind gusts from thunderstorms. certain types of fire dangers, weather, red flag warnings. All those things are things that we talk about, and we create a custom threat forecast. We like to, we're capable of doing any kind of forecast deliverable, but we have a command center, which most people use. And basically, we're publishing out forecasts with sort of threat stoplight codes, where at a glance, you can spend 1 minute or 30 minutes absorbing your forecast by just opening it up, looking at your command center forecast portal. Are there any red flags? Are there any very high risks? All those things, we make it real easy to do. We also, it's often very important in very significant weather events to get, you have conference call briefings, you get everybody on the phone to talk through a significant concern. Maybe there's a large fire that's getting out of control and it's threatening your transmission lines, and you have to talk about staffing and safety concerns and planning around mitigation and also restorations. And so we're able to jump on calls and answer questions, whether it's a briefing or a phone support or sending an email that gets out to folks in the field. There's a lot of different ways of getting support to utilities to keep them making the proper decisions. One of the things about the forecast deliverables, it's also very flexible. It allows users to get forecasts on tablets, mobile phones, any type of mobile phone. Of course, the desktop, it will all look the same. It'll all have the same information. And it's very easy to take a forecast where you check it out when you're in the office, and when you go out in the field, you have it still on your mobile phone. So a lot of flexibility there. We understand there's a lot of people in the field, and we want to make sure that the information is easy to get. Also, we understand that weather changes, and it can go drastically from one thing to another. And so we will send updates and notify you with forecast updates, that emails that indicate that we've maybe lowered a threat for severe thunderstorms, or we're adjusting a threat for a red flag warning or a fire weather warning that's in effect. It's all secure logins. There's high security demand with these sorts of products these days. We understand that, and the products are going to be secured to only your company. Part of the customization is also doing maps. We're able to do customized maps of different weather parameters that will basically give you situational awareness. Situational awareness is probably the key driving benefit of the threat forecast, because you can look out a number of days. We can do forecasts out as much as a couple weeks. We do some fire weather outlooks out that go out months in some cases, where we're just giving you some information where maybe you're doing some long-term planning, or maybe it's for the next day or the next 2 days, or some weekend restoration or maintenance that you got planned. All that information can be forecasted by the meteorologists. They're going to tell you, when is the safest time to have your crews out. When would a snowstorm end? Right now, across Canada, you have temperatures that are ranging from the upper 80s to the 20s, and so you get a wide range of weather that can happen. You can have big changes, and we would supply automatically updating products that will tell you, what does the latest radar look like? Where is the the latest lightning. Lightning alerts are very commonly used by our utilities. They want to know when thunderstorms may have started in the area. We have custom alerting around thunderstorm threats. We'll outline the probabilities, the time of generation, the coverage, the start and stop times. All these are super critical in planning. And so all that information can be put into a product that's pushed out to you, so you understand that maybe the best time to get out is in the morning, and severe weather can be anticipated between 2 and 5 p.m. We want to make sure you know about that and you're not left guessing, and you have the right crews available. And so doing those forecast services are very important. The customization, as I mentioned, we can do special events. We can do special forecasts for specific points of concern. There are a wide range of different products, pretty much whatever you would define for us, we would be able to give you a forecast that would keep everyone safe and keep the business going. I mentioned the command center. I'm just going to run through a quick example of what you might get there. This is an example for a basic utility. Separating utilities often break their footprints down into operational regions, and we adapt to that. We're able to ingest the shape files of these regions. This one is an example of just a generic north and south region. But what we do is we give, for example, a synopsis, a discussion around the weather affecting the West, and in this example, where the key fire danger elements are, and what times would they be and where, and a lot of details gets put into these discussions. This is where we customize down to your footprint. There's a lot of general information out there, both on the Environment Canada website. Most of it leaves you to kind of have to zoom in onto your local area. And what we do is we pull the information out that affects you, and we will discuss it based on identifiable geographic, industrial, road, highway landmarks within your territory, giving you an idea of where you have to be concerned. And then this threat probabilities gives you a quick look to see where you need to focus. The red colors are going to pull you in, and you understand where you're high and very high risks. Again, if there's none, you won't have any thing to worry about. It'll pop up. Everything will be grayed out, and you can move on to some other concerns. And again, focusing on each individual region, we have some utilities that have up to 8 unique regions defined. It can be done in really any way that you would like. We also provide a lot of situational graphics. This one's very general, covering the Western US, but these maps are all able to be zoomed in onto smaller footprints. And as Sean showed, there's a lot of federal products out there, and what we want to do is limit your time for searching these things out. So we bring these maps into you. We'll provide a commentary on this as it relates to where you are located. Of course, there's other weather besides fire. Thunderstorms and lightning do start many fires out, especially in the western parts of North America. And so understanding fire threats, where could storms occur? What is the timing for these? When would they start? When would they end? Also, could they become severe? I don't have on here, but obviously winter weather is a big concern. We get into forecasting extreme cold parameters, extreme snow parameters, all those things having their own threat probabilities, and they all have very customizable discussions. So there's an opportunity to save a lot of time and resource time, and getting everybody on the same message as you get a command center portal that would basically pull all this information together for you, and then ultimately give you an outlook on what your concerns are for the day. So Sean did talk a bit about lightning. Earth Networks does run a global lightning network that's used by many governments across the country, across the world. The National Weather Service in the US, we are the primary lightning provider. And so we have very high detection efficiency across Canada. You can locate within 500 meters cloud to ground strikes where they are occurring within seconds. And so this can be very handy for understanding where you've had lightning that could be a concern to your operations, your transmission, or could be potentially sparking new fire points. So those are tools that we use in an operational sense for your forecasting, but that information can also be pushed right out to you in products that FTS and Earth Networks provides. So I'm going to wrap it up there and open things up for any questions and comments, and we'll bring Sean back in.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Mark and Sean. That was very insightful. Actually, some of those numbers, Sean, you were talking about at the start in terms of the magnitude of the wildfires is really staggering to hear. So being aware of those risks and everything's so important, so you can take those preventative measures and be prepared to respond and even have a recovery plan in place, especially in those vulnerable areas. So thanks again for that. We're going to open the session up to some Q&As. So to the audience, just a reminder to type in those questions in your questions panel on your window there. To start off, I might throw a couple of ones at you guys. So Sean, and maybe you can talk about what are some of the key differences in the use and application of a portable or a compact fire weather stations versus a fixed site fire weather station?
Yeah, it's a good question. The traditional fixed remote automated weather station is, chosen by, either a wildfire agency or electric utility organization that is identified as site, and it's traditionally on a tri-leg tower, has a fence around it. It's to protect it from wildlife and external influences. And the sensor packages are installed at very specific guidelines and parameters. For example, a wind anemometer at 30 feet on a tower, get wind speed and direction, fuel temperature, fuel moisture stick. I think it's 18 inches above the ground. So the idea is that because the ground has an impact on the weather data collected. For example, you don't want to put it on a concrete pad or on asphalt is going to disrupt you. You want to have it to reflect the actual environmental conditions on the site relative to the ground and the forest and all the fuel around it, for example. So those are, I mentioned about the, over 5,000 of those globally, about 3,500 in the United States. So those are positioned across, the landscape by professionals to figure out where they want to collect the on-site data. So those are standalone fixed sites and part of the National Fire Danger Rating System. The utility organizations, we've learned that they have installed their own proprietary micro stations, some of them commercial grade, not necessarily industry grade, like our RAWs are, and the RAWs scientific grade sensor packages. But so we've taken that and identified that there's a need there for something smaller, more compact. So the compact weather stations are really the sensor package that are on a RAWs, but don't come with the tri-leg tower, and they're mounted on utility assets like distribution poles or transmission towers. The other portable option is the quick deploy or the iRAWs, which I mentioned in my slide deck there. About one person could set it up without tools in 15 minutes. And and really that the genesis of that came out of wildfire agencies doing either prescribed burning or doing major wildfire control operations where they want to have very specific weather data on site. Fire behavior analysts, for example, would use a quick deploy station to get forecast where the fire is going to be in 1 hour, 1 day, and beyond, kind of thing. So those are some of the tools that have come out of the industry by people that use this equipment on the ground, and that's FTS has benefited from that. Responded to those needs, and so that's how we have those products.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Sean, I can vouch for that having unique observations and spots that have very unique weather situations are used by us all the time, and they can be so helpful in understanding the weather situations and how things are developing. And so I can't back that up enough about how much we use those unique weather points, those stations that are out there in the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when we respond to fires, whether it was driving out in vehicles or using aircraft, I mean, to always be asked by incident commanders or anyone else that might be going to that site or near that site, say, well, what was the weather like? What were the conditions? Because we have, access to weather stations and whatnot, but there might be a, 10-kilometer gap between weather stations. So, and we all know there, as you know, Mark, that's your expertise, are microclimates in the topography. On the lee side of mountains, there's less rain. South aspect is getting more vegetation accumulation and more sun exposure and solar radiation. All kinds of impacts that dictate what the wildfire behavior is going to do on any given day. So it only stands to reason and makes perfect sense to have on-site real-time data. So
great, thanks, guys. Quick follow-up question to that. So what are some of the key differences between wildfire agencies and electric utility organizations in terms of wildfire risk and mitigation?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're obviously trying to find the benchmark, technology and follow suit, like, a lot of the major investor-owned utilities and everything from, public utility districts, electric cooperatives, and everything in between those ranges of utility organizations. They all want to do the right thing for the right reasons, right? And they keep power to their customers, but keep people safe. And public safety power shutoffs is something that is more on the radar of people, and we also know that there's a lot of public backlash from that. So there's a lot of reasons for people to have this real-time weather data, but not everyone has access to it. So what we're finding is that some of the electric utility organizations that we've spoken with that want to access the RAWS network, because we've identified by looking at maps and where these are located that they're right in their areas of interest. They just don't have access to that data. So by them purchasing and owning a RAWS station, they will automatically become part of the RAWS network. So that gives them access to all the other RAWS stations in the network of 3,000 in the United States, for example. Same in Canada, there are over 1,000 in Canada as well. So by having one, they have access to their station, but also have access to surrounding RAWS. So they're part of the club, they're part of the network. But what we're also finding is that some of them don't necessarily need to have access or participation in that national program. They just really want to know site-specific data for a particular right-of-way or something like that. So that's where these other options are available, these compact and portable weather stations to, what we would call infill stations, to help them out with that. And they're, a significantly cheaper option as well.
Perfect. So that is great, and I think that's all the time we have for Q&A as we're running up to 2 o'clock. So thank you guys again for taking the time. I believe you have some contact info that you might want to throw up on the screen for folks if they'd like to reach out.
Yeah.
There you go. So we will end it there, but before we conclude today's session, I'd like to remind the audience to mark your calendars for our upcoming sessions. On June 3rd, Kyan will present our webinar on utility customer information system, CIS cloud decision, on-premise versus cloud. And following that, on June 10th, we have Redline Communications, who's going to be talking about industrial grade wireless networks. So please join us for those. All of CA's future events and webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter, again, which is Current Affairs, or you can find them on our news and events section on our website at electricity.ca. In closing, I'd like to thank again Sean and Mark for you guys' great presentation in FTS, for taking the time to join us. And this concludes today's session. And we will talk to you next time. Everybody stay safe. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Farhan. Thank you, Danny, behind the scenes there. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good day.